गोपाला आनंद नंद गोपाला गोपाला आनंद नंद गोपाला हे नंद नंद आनंद नंद है तो नंद नंद गोपाला नंद नंद आनंद नंद है तो नंद नंद गोपाला हे नंद नंद आनंद नंद है तो नंद नंद गोपाला गोपाला आनंद नंद गोपाला हे नंद नंद गोपाला आनंद नंद गोपाला हे नंद नंद गोपाला आनंद नंद गोपाला गोपाला आनंद नंद गोपाला हे नंद नंद गोपाला आनंद नंद गोपाला हे नंद नंद गोपाला आनंद नंद गोपाला हे नंद नंद गोपाला गोपाला आनंद नंद गोपाला हे नंद नंद गोपाला आनंद नंद गोपाला हे नंद नंद गोपाला आनंद नंद गोपाला नंद नंद गोपाला आनंद नंद गोपाला हे नंद नंद गोपाला आनंद नंद गोपाला हे नंद नंद गोपाला आनंद नंद गोपाला नंद आनंद नंद है तो नंद नंद गोपाला हे नंद नंद आनंद नंद है तो नंद नंद गोपाला हे नंद नंद आनंद नंद है तो नंद नंद गोपाला हे नंद नंद Gopala, Anand Nand Gopala. Nand Gopala, Anand Nand Gopala. He Nand Nand Anand Nand hai to Nand Nand Gopala. Anand Nand hai to Nand Nand Gopala. He Nand Nand Anand Nand hai to Nand Nand Gopala. Nand Gopala, Anand Nand Gopala. Nand Nand Gopala, Anand Nand Gopala. Nand Gopala, Anand Nand Gopala. Nand Nand Gopala, Anand Nand Gopala.
Welcome to Satsang. Are you still thinking when you're just watching and observing? So, in our meditation, and even in our lives, where you bring in a practice of mindfulness. You bring in a practice of what's called witness consciousness. One of the first things that we do when we witness is we judge. So we watch our breath, and a voice in our head says, that breath isn't long enough. That breath isn't deep enough. That breath isn't slow enough. We drop deeper. In the midst, a thought comes, we notice that it's come, but we don't hook our attention into it. Nonetheless, there's a part of the brain that says, oh, you're never going to get this spiritual thing down. There you are thinking. Why is it that whenever you try to meditate, that guy always comes back in your mind? Or that girl always comes in your mind? Here I am trying to meditate. It's bad enough he or she occupies my mind the rest of the time, but here I am trying to meditate. Now in my meditation also they've come. And so the mind starts judging. Or sometimes it does things that it thinks are useful. So I'll have a thought and the mind will say, that's my anger at my mother. That's my insecurity. That's my inferiority, whatever it may be. Now, we spoke last night about the different forms of intelligence, one of them being emotional intelligence. And I was talking about how important it is to understand our own emotional makeup so that we'd stop blaming the world outside for things that are going on inside. But the time for that is not meditation. A lot of things come up in meditation, and that's actually good. It's wonderful. The mind finally gets quiet. Suddenly, awareness, realizations, insights, they start to come, and it's beautiful. But you just want to be sure not to lose your meditation in analysis. Pujya Swamiji gives a 3-component multivitamin that has meditation, no reaction, and introspection. And he always says, begin the day with meditation. During the day, practice no reaction. And at the end of the day, introspection. And what's important in that distinction is that meditation and introspection are not the same. So they're both important, but if I'm analyzing, if I'm thinking about the thought that's blowing across my awareness quickly, hopefully, I'm not meditating. If you imagine lying on your back and looking up at a blue sky, and you're watching the sky, now suddenly, every once in a while, a cloud will come by. Imagine it's a windy day, clouds come by, and a cloud goes like this, and it obscures the sun, and it obscures the brightness of the blue sky. And it keeps going. Now you've got 2 options. Option 1 is you take your eyes and you follow the cloud. You watch it go from here all the way across. The other option is you stay focused on the blueness of the sky. and the clouds will come one by one. But instead of hooking the awareness into them and following them across, you simply return the awareness to the blueness of the sky. And that's what meditation is. So when we're meditating on our breath, or on a mantra, or on the infinite nature of the self, thoughts will come, yeah. Like clouds. But you don't want to hook yourself into it. Because then what you find is the meditation is over. So I'm meditating and suddenly maybe I get a whiff of a smell. Some smell comes. And my mind, which is impacted not only by my meditation, but also, of course, by the fact that I've got an empty stomach. I've just woken up in the morning. It's a long time since dinner. I get this whiff of something that smells good, and my mind suddenly says, croissant. Now, what most of us do is we hook the awareness into that, and we go, oh yeah, God, those croissants that I had in Paris, they were so good. I should really take another trip to Paris. It's been so long since I've been there. God, when do I get holiday again? I hate this new job. I only get 2 weeks. I used to get 4 weeks. Well, but it's closer to the house. At least I'm not stuck in so much traffic. So you see, we've gone from simply the awareness of a sensation. A smell has entered our nasal passages and made its way to the perception in our mind. And suddenly, I've gone to Paris. I've gone to my favorite croissant shop in Paris. I've gone to my new job, the pros and the cons. And God knows how long it's going to be before some part of my mind says, wait, I was meditating. And then you start to try to reel back in the mind. And it's not always so superficial. Sometimes maybe it's a smell of a croissant. And the mind says, oh, God, I'd love a croissant, but I can't. I've gained 5 pounds. I really have to wait until I lose the weight. Then I can have a croissant. Well, who says 5 pounds is too much? What's wrong with being a few extra pounds overweight? Yeah, well, this was what I learned. My sister, who my whole life told me I was too pudgy, who I just wanted to be like my sister. Now, finally, I get thin. Now I've gained the weight. Now I hate myself. I hate my sister. Can't believe my parents let her torture me like that. What were they thinking? So again, a whiff. Someone in the apartment building may be baking some bread. Somewhere outside, there's a pastry shop. And my meditation is over. I'm back in my childhood. I'm all over the world. And so meditation, we have to be really clear, is about coming back, coming back, coming back. In fact, if you study the 8 limbs of yoga, while we certainly by no means have to take them sequentially, you could certainly learn to work with the breath before you learn to work with the body. You could learn meditation before you learned asanas. But if you did take them sequentially, what you'll notice is they get more and more subtle. And the point that's worth mentioning here, rather than taking all our time to talk about the 8 limbs, it's a beautiful subject though, but I won't go all the way there tonight. But what's important is the limb right before samadhi. Samadhi is the 8th limb, what you could call the ultimate goal of yoga. Union, but ecstatic union, divine union. So right before that is meditation. And meditation becomes samadhi when the object of meditation, the meditator, become one. But just before meditation is the practice of single-pointed focus. And the reason that I mention this is if you cannot bring your mind to one place, you cannot take it to meditation. So a single-pointed focus isn't meditation, but it's a crucial step just before meditation. Having my mind focused on one thing, a word, a candle flame, an image, whatever it may be, my breath, is that which is essential to give me the possibility of experiencing meditation. And so if my mind is all over the place, whether with croissants in Paris or my own judgment, even the thinking that I think is helpful, even the thinking that is helpful, the introspective thinking, isn't meditation. And so when you are simply witnessing, when you're simply watching, it's with no judgment, no analysis. It's just presence. And it's an extraordinary practice, by the way, because not only does it give you a deep and real experience of the truth of who you are, which isn't your thoughts, but is that expansiveness between the thoughts. But it also gives you a wonderful tool, a wonderful habit, a wonderful sanskara for moving through the world, because the ways that our minds work in meditation is the same way our minds work in the world. Unfortunately, we don't have two minds. You don't get to have your moving through the world with judgment mind and then you're meditating really calm, non-judgmental mind. It's one mind. The work we do with it in meditation benefits us as we move through the world. And so if I can learn to watch my own thoughts without judgment, to be with myself without analysis, without judgment, it actually gives me this wonderful habit of being able to move through the world just being aware. Because that awareness, that consciousness, is the only thing that doesn't change. So one day you sit down to meditate, your mind is all over the place, you're nervous, you're stressed, you've got a massive presentation at work, your whole job depends upon it. The ability to simply be mindful and watch it is the same ability, the same awareness, the same consciousness that you sink into when you sit down to meditate on Christmas morning or Diwali morning or your birthday morning and you're super happy and excited and just overflowing with gratitude and joy. The emotional mind is in two completely different places. That which is consistent is the consciousness that you drop into through the thinking mind. And so as you move through all the different states of feeling, the different emotions, that which is constant is consciousness, it's awareness. And so it becomes like this soil in which the garden of the rest of your mind grows. So, okay, over here is a flower. This is my worried about my office presentation anxiety. All right. This is my happy on Christmas morning over here. Okay. This is longing. This is yearning. This is regretting. And on the surface, they look like very, very different parts of me. Hence, we go through the world fragmented and scattered, and first I'm this way, then I'm that way, then I don't know who I am. You know, it's funny, we ask each other all day long, oh, how are you? Like, I'll see you at breakfast, how are you? Great, how are you? See you at lunch, how are you? Great, wonderful. See you at dinner, how are you? Now, how is it that how we are changes so frequently between breakfast and lunch and dinner? I heard once this very, very beautiful saint was speaking about this, and he said, somebody asked me in the evening how I was, and that same person had asked me in the morning how I was. He said, and I told them, I'm the same. Don't you remember you asked me in the morning? So because we think these are separate aspects of us, whatever piece of it I'm identified with, morning, oh yeah, I'm rose flower. Lunch, jasmine. Evening, sunflower. Night, apple tree. Based on what I'm identified as. But if instead we drop into that soil, that consciousness, awareness. Well, the awareness is aware that there's a rose bush growing in it. Awareness is aware there's a jasmine plant growing. Awareness is aware there's an apple tree growing. So if we can identify with the awareness, but first you have to practice having awareness. Practice being. These different thought forms arise, like different flowers in different seasons at different times. But ultimately, that which is consistent, therefore that which is true, is consciousness, is awareness, is love, is truth, is oneness. All these different words that we use to describe that same experience. So don't think too much while you're meditating. When it comes, just let it go by. If you find that you've got really an active mind, and you find that what it's producing is useful in some way, not just nonsense, keep a notebook. Keep a recorder. Don't keep your phone for voice notes. It's way too tempting to then see a message that's come up. Get just like a normal dictaphone or recorder, whatever it is, something that doesn't do anything else. Keep a notepad and a pen, whatever. It's less disturbing to your meditation to open your eyes for 30 seconds and get out a thought in word or in note than it is to let it keep disturbing your meditation. But then just bring it back. Bring it back. Bring it back. To have that experience of who is there in between the thoughts. Who is there in between the feelings, in between the emotions, in between the memories? Who is that? But you have to let there be that space. to be able to say who's there. So we bring it back. And ultimately, there's quiet. And don't worry about naming who's there. That's another game we get into. Oh, is this soul? Oh, this must be consciousness I'm feeling. Don't let yourself do that either. The minute we start labeling things semantically, again, we've come out of the experience. Think about being in a beautiful embrace with a loved one. Okay? Just close your eyes and imagine that for a moment. It doesn't have to be romantic. It could be a mother, a father, a child. It could be your pet. It could be a tree. But just think about being in a beautiful embrace. Now, as you're in the embrace, start to try to describe for me with words what you're feeling. You don't have to do it out loud, just do it in your mind. So tell me all about it. How does it feel? It's hard, it's soft, it's comforting, it's scary. He or she's tall, short, fat, thin. Okay, open your eyes. What happened when you started to try to describe it for me in your mind? Did anybody notice anything happen when you started to do that? When you shifted from being in the embrace to describing the embrace? Did anybody notice a felt sense difference? Yeah, what did you notice? Yeah, exactly. Suddenly you're in your head. Suddenly I'm no longer in the embrace. Here two had become one. We're merging, we're melting in love and oneness. Now my brain says, God, has he gained weight? Has she gained weight? My arms don't touch anymore. Has he or she lost weight? God, I hope he or she doesn't get the wrong idea from this hug. Has this hug gone on too long? This hasn't gone on long enough. Are they holding me tightly or not tightly? Has he fallen out of love with me? So the minute the mind, I'm no longer in the embrace. Same thing when that embrace is not a physical one, but when then that embrace is with yourself. When you meditate, it's an embrace with the self. And when you have that experience of melting into that stillness, that spaciousness, it's exquisite. And the minute the mind starts to say, oh, I wonder if this is, oh, I wonder if this should be happening. What about, oh, I have to remember to ask this tomorrow in Satsang. You're no longer there. So just keep yourself there. Don't let the brain kick in. It's actually a game of the ego. It's the ego trying to pull you out of it while pretending to be your friend. Because that union into everythingness terrifies the ego. Because when there's no longer any borders or boundaries around me, the ego no longer has a grounding, a rooting. The ego's rooted in this is who I am, this is where I end and you begin. So as that dissolves, the ego panics. But it's very clever, and so it starts to come into your mind. Sometimes it even comes in and says, you better come back, you're going to get lost, you're never going to be able to come back. You're going to go crazy. You're going to go too far. A lot of times people come in and ask, and I know I had this exact same experience of that, a fear. When you hit the deepest part of meditation for the first time, there's this fear that comes in about, gotta go back. And this is just the ego clamoring to somehow hold back on. It'll do whatever it can do. So again, don't yell at it. Don't say, oh yeah, that's my ego. I see you, buddy. Just bring it back. Just bring it back. Just bring it back. And then, of course, in other times of the day, introspection is great. So if you notice that when you're meditating, issues are coming up, specific bits of insight or wisdom are coming up, by all means, look at them. Just don't look at them in your meditation. Set aside a different time to think about that which comes up in meditation. Are there any questions that anyone here has? Yes. I even have a cordless for you. Look at that.
Thank you. My question is about divorce, actually.
Okay.
And how divorce is, it's like a wildfire that goes through your life and burns everything down. But it leaves the roots behind of all the things that got you there. I'm wondering how you move through it to not repeat the same patterns again and come back to yourself and owning your power. And the second half of that is how to guide and facilitate forgiveness of self, but also to how to help children through it.
Okay. So, divorce. First of all, you need to honor the love. And that's really hard, of course, especially in horrible divorces. My dad is a divorce lawyer, so I grew up hearing dinner table stories of what people did to each other. And yet, there was love. And we know that the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is indifference. Hate can come only where there were feelings. It doesn't have to have been love. But if you have loved, which presumably if you were married at some point there was, whether it was a full, healthy love or not so healthy of a love, nonetheless there was love. And it's important to realize that just because someone is gone, whether due to divorce, whether death, that love for them still can exist within us. And that's really important to remember, because one of the confounding factors in divorce is, how could I have been so stupid? How could I have trusted? When you say self-forgiveness, well, a lot of that is, how could I have been duped? How did I allow myself to be made such a fool of? Well, you loved. And honor that love and realize that even though that person may have proven him or herself to be totally unworthy of your love, that doesn't diminish the quality of your love. Love exists within you. You manufacture that. The other person may be the catalyst for whom you decided to turn on your love manufacturing plant. They may have created an environment that made it feel safe to turn it on. But ultimately, that love manufacturing plant is in you, not in them. And the reason that you know that is if you think about the loved one, while you still love them, getting on an airplane and flying across the world, or even just going to the kitchen or the grocery store. Your experience of love does not diminish with physical distance. If the love existed in them, you would feel less the further that they were. Right? You have an air conditioner. Sit under the air conditioner, you get a lot of cold air. Go 20 feet away, you get less cold air. Go 100 feet away, you get no cold air. Get in a plane, fly across the world? Yeah, right. Are we gonna benefit by an AC on in LA right now? Of course not. But love isn't like that. Love is in you, not in them. And that's important because that love manufacturing plant is an essential part of who you are. And when you are betrayed by someone on any level, you lose not only that person, but a lot of us then start to try to turn off our love manufacturing plant. And then we lose twice. So you have to first realize the love is beautiful, love is within you, and love loves regardless of whether the other person deserves it or not. So allow yourself to continue to experience that love. Doesn't mean that you have to love what they did. Doesn't mean that you have to love their identity, their personality. But it simply means honoring the love that you have produced inside of you in connection with that person. Number one. Number two. We get into relationships, especially when we're young, either young in age or young in various forms of psychological maturity, because the other person represents something that fills a hole we have. So, girls who are sheltered a lot in overprotective family environments will very frequently find themselves falling for, whether they actually go out with him or not, it's a different story, but falling for the bad boys. Why? Because there's this piece in them that knows they're being completely suffocated. And there's this yearning on some level for rebellion, to break free, to have anonymity. And this boy represents that. And so all over the world, girls fall in love. And I'm sure boys do it as well. I just think the stereotype tends to work more with like an overprotected girl and a rebellious young boy. Not for anything having to do actually with the guy, but simply having to do with this hole that I'm having in me about personal freedom, personal space, personal anonymity, personal power, separation from parents, and what this guy and all of his drug-abusing, school-skipping personality embodies. But it also happens on a lot more subtle levels. That which I feel I don't have. I don't feel beautiful. I don't feel worthy. I don't feel good enough. I meet someone who says, oh, you are my everything. You are the best. You are the most beautiful. You are the most brilliant. I couldn't live without you. Well, all those holes that I was having, suddenly I'm no longer feeling them. But then we change in life. We grow. They change. And it no longer fits. So we fall out of love. When divorce happens, it's really important, especially when there are kids, as you say, not only to not use them between each other, of course, but regardless of what you may think about the other parent, to not tell that to the child. Kids don't need to know that dad cheated on mom or mom cheated on dad. Totally unnecessary information for a young child. As they get older, conversations may arise in their own life in which you may feel free to open up about things that you didn't tell them when they were 8 or 9 or 10. Having as much stability as possible in parenting is important for children. That being said, kids are actually a lot more resilient than we tend to give them credit for. They can handle a divorce. What they can't handle nearly as well is the parents using them, parents playing them, parents telling them all kinds of nonsense, and the parents themselves being stressed and miserable. So as long as you can be grounded and anchored and deal with divorce proceedings in your own way, but be there for your child and help them understand that not everybody is meant to be with everybody, but that doesn't mean that mom or dad is any less wonderful of a being, and to remind them mom, dad really loves you, even though mom and dad don't necessarily still want to live together. Both mom and dad still want to be with you. And in terms of forgiveness, whether it's a divorce or any one of all the other circumstances in our life that warrant forgiveness, we do it really for one reason and one reason only. Because if you don't forgive, you can't be free. You cannot simultaneously be holding a grudge and be spiritually free. And so we forgive because regardless of what anyone has done to us, regardless even of what we've done to anyone, we deserve to be free, spiritually. Commit a crime, the court will decide you don't deserve to be free in that way, but spiritually you deserve to be free. And that's why we forgive others and ourselves. They're gonna suffer or enjoy whatever the fruits of their karma are. Whatever their karmic package is gonna bring them based on what they've done. The law of karma is perfect. Jump off a roof, you fall to the ground. Plant an apple seed, you get an apple tree. These are laws of nature. You don't need to stand over an apple tree saying, remember, better not come up oranges. It knows. Same way. Someone does something. They're going to have natural karmic repercussions of that. We don't need to remind the universe about it. We don't have to be God's secretary. You know, I always say, until and unless God comes down and say, hey, do me a favor. Could you note this one down for me? Could you make sure I don't forget? Until and unless that happens, the law of karma is functional. We need to worry about our own freedom. And holding grudges, holding pain, keeps us from being free. And so we let go. But lastly, as you say, how do we make sure we don't make the same mistakes again? So forgiveness does not mean that we let go of our common sense. I may forgive someone who hurt me because I need to be free. I deserve to be free. That's my highest goal, yearning. But that doesn't mean that I leave my common sense and my brain at the door. So in the workplace, somebody cheats me, okay. I'm going to forgive them so that I can digest my food when I eat food, so that I can fall asleep at night without a pill, so that I can meditate without their face seared into the inside of my eyelids. But I'm not going to go into business with them again. I'm not going to lend them money again. And I may not lend anyone money for a while. I may need to make sure that I've properly developed an ability to know how to operate. And in the same way with relationship, take some time. Figure out, what was it in you that led you into that situation? What holes in you was this person filling? And then, of course, what buttons did they push to trigger the fighting? Because it goes both ways. You triggered them, they triggered you. So what holes were they filling that made you think they were it? And then what buttons did they push that triggered the fighting? And then do what you can to work with both of those. So how can you fill those holes yourself? Even better, how can you realize you don't have holes? And how can you understand what those emotional triggers are? That being, of course, the emotional intelligence, but then using your spiritual intelligence to develop immunity to them. Because spirituality is not an inoculation against bad things happening. But it is a very powerful inoculation against us losing ourselves when things happen. And so you being spiritual doesn't mean nobody's going to push your buttons. They may push them even more. But it means that you're not going to be impacted by that. That's why relationships ideally should really be 1 + 1 = 1 rather than half and half equals 1. So it's not so much I'm looking for my other half, it's I'm looking for the other whole one with whom I can experience a greater sense of oneness, with whom my oneness expands, but not whom I need to fill my holes. If you can be strong and okay, your kids will be fine. That's the core piece. We know from studies on children that more than anything, the ideally happy marriage and partnership between mom and dad, but otherwise the stability, the grounding, the anchoring of mom and dad, if not together, then individually, is what's going to give them that. And you know what? Things happen in life. And so they learned it earlier rather than later. And it's a wonderful opportunity. I don't know how old they are, but it's a wonderful opportunity to use it to help them understand. Sometimes you really want something to work, it doesn't work. Sometimes you really try at something, but you don't succeed. Mom and dad tried at this marriage thing, couldn't make it work. But that's okay. Because in life, you don't necessarily succeed at everything you try. And maybe you'll try again, not necessarily with each other, but with someone else. You know, you keep trying, that this is how life moves. And what's important is that in the face of both success and failure, marriage, jobs, that our children learn we don't fall apart. You know, you hear so many stories of kids who are no longer kids, now they're adults, but who as children were raised in horrendous circumstances, abject poverty, living on the streets. But the consistent line through so many of those stories is, my mom or my dad, even when there was nothing to eat, even when there wasn't a home, my mom or my dad, and it's all about that grounding, that anchoring of what the mother and or the father gave them, that made being on the street, not having food, bearable. Not the end of the world. And then, of course, we have so many situations of kids born and raised in mansions with everything, but with parents who themselves are not anchored or grounded, for whom nothing is ever enough, who are never satisfied. And these kids end up with completely different stories. But when you listen to both of them, you typically feel like I would choose the mother or father in the first case, because that doesn't actually seem as bad. So they'll be fine, as long as you're fine. And when you're not fine, make sure you've got a really good friend circle, a support circle. Nourish yourself so that you can nourish them. Have a beautiful rest of your evening, and we'll look forward